What value is found in the law? How is God's love expressed through the provision of his commandments? Written in stone and on display around the country are the very commandments that have helped guide our way of life. Does today's generation value these? Why have they been under attack? Our guest today will give us insight on the value behind God's very words, the Ten Commandments. Stay tuned. You're watching the Everlasting Love program. I'm Barbara Karpuzian, and it is great to be with you. I hope that you enjoyed the music at the beginning of the program. We're always glad that you've decided to join us. You know that God loves you so much. He loves you with an everlasting love. The scriptures tell us that God so loved the world that he actually came as a human being. He came to lay down his life for us, to forgive our sins, and to make a way for us to be with him for eternity. And if you choose him today, all you've got to do is call on him, ask him to come into your life, choose him today. He will gladly come in. You'll experience transformation in your life, a wholeness, a restoration, a healing. That's the kind of God that he is, a God who loves you intensely and immensely. During the course of the program, you'll see our number and our website up on the screen. We would love to hear from you. Our number is 773-286-2171, and our website is www.everlastinglovetv.com. If there's something on the program that interests you, if you have a question, if you're looking for a good church, a Bible study, if you simply want someone to pray with you, we're always happy to be there. We'll get back to you. Just feel free to drop us a line or give us a call. And so, you heard at the beginning of the program, we're going to talk about the Ten Commandments. And that might sound a little archaic to some folks, right? The Ten Commandments, there's been fights across our nation. Should the Ten Commandments be on a public wall? Should they be in a school? What purpose does the Ten Commandments serve? How have the Ten Commandments sort of helped to frame the morality of our nation? And so with me on the program today is Dr. Kevin Zuber, and he is a professor of theology at Moody Bible Institute.
That's right.
Such a great institute, such a great place. We're so blessed to have that institution in our city. It's been there for a long time.
125 years.
125 years, and has produced so many young people who have gone out into the mission field, who have gone on to serve God and to do great things for God. And we so appreciate that stabilizing force that's in our city. And I think about Moody, who said that if every day of his life he could just talk to one person about Jesus Christ, that he would be a happy camper. And God used him in a powerful way to bring revival to the city.
Absolutely.
So welcome to the program,
Thank you,
Dr.
Barbara.
Zuber.
Good to be here again.
You are the expert today.
I'll do
I
my
am
best.
a student and you are the professor.
I'll do my best.
And let's talk about this topic.
The Ten Commandments. Again, everybody's heard of them. Everybody understands the Ten Commandments come somewhere from the Bible. Unfortunately, to be perfectly honest, and although the movie is very old and it's one of those movies that certain generation, they don't remember it or they never saw it, a large part of our population, a large part of the people, if they've heard of the Ten Commandments, that's the first thing they think of is the movie. If you say the Ten Commandments, they start thinking about the movie. And while the movie was very entertaining and good, and it's still worth watching, probably more worth watching than a lot of the other stuff that comes on cinematically these days, it didn't really say a lot about the Ten Commandments themselves. There was a dramatic scene of the Lord writing the Ten Commandments in stone, but almost instantly a picture and the storyline in the movie was that the children of Israel were already violating the Ten Commandments. And so as far as that goes, culturally speaking, the Ten Commandments, whatever they might be, is not really well known. They're not really well known, and the content of the Ten Commandments aren't really well known these days either. Again, in a previous generation, not only were the Ten Commandments taught in church, or in Sunday school or in catechism classes, the Ten Commandments would be taught in school. They would be part of the regular curriculum, and not just back in the days of Little House on the Prairie and the one-room schoolhouse. I mean, even into the 20th century, it was a part of the regular curriculum and a part of what people expected to be taught to young kids and even older kids as they were growing up, as a part of what constituted their moral instruction and how they could be productive members of society. And that began to change in the middle years of the 20th century as the school system, back in the 1960s, prayer was excluded from the school. And then through, I think, a very concerted effort, an effort by certain people that sort of misread or flipped the Constitution on its head. You know, the Constitution says that we are supposed to have freedom of religion, and somewhere along the line people started interpreting that as freedom from religion. And while and I think honestly most people would look at it today and people would say, we don't want your morality shoved down our throats. And frankly, I don't see anybody really trying to do that, at least not from the Christian side of things. We offer that as a moral guidance and an alternative for a productive life, but nobody's trying to shove it down anybody's throats. But still, this notion that we need to be free from religion and need to be freed from these kinds of influences.
Or the separation of church and state. I read like a Barna study where where a large percentage of folks actually thought that was in the Constitution. And where is that actually, right? Isn't it in one of the letters that was written by Madison?
Well, it was one of the letters written by Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson. It was even an offhanded comment. I mean, in that day, in the days of the founding of the United States, most other countries in Europe and other places in the world had what was called the established church. I mean, clear back into the time of the Reformation and before, the idea of having a state, a government, a king, that didn't also include a particular faith or branch of the Christian faith, as in places in Europe, people didn't even conceive of that. It was not even thought of that you wouldn't have, that the entire realm wouldn't have the same faith as the king or the duke or whatever. It was a given. People didn't even imagine this. As time went on, they began to have more enlightened views, because what would happen is the minorities, the people that would have minority opinion, for instance, during the time of the Reformation, people who were Baptists or of that variety would find they would be persecuted, they would be driven out of particular areas. And the point there is that these minorities were to be protected by the separation of church and state. So when the colonies came, there was a lot of freedom there. William Penn offered a great deal of freedom and openness, and in Pennsylvania, that became one of those states that fostered this idea that any faith, Protestant, Lutheran, even Catholic, could come and they would be accepted. And then that sort of wove itself into the fabric of the colonies and colonial thinking until the time of the founding of the states after the Revolution. This notion of the separation of church and state was instituted to protect the church, to protect minorities, to protect so that people who were in the minority. This has always been the idea of liberal government, although the word liberals turn on its head somewhat these days, but liberal government is to protect the rights of the citizens, even the minorities. Well, again, somewhere along the line that got turned on its head, and now separation of church and state means you can't, anything that has government sanction, anything that's related to the government, schools, government programs, government that's in terms of the kinds of even activities to help people, that cannot have any kind of affiliation or influence from any kind of religion at all. The separation, again, the freedom from religion sort of notion.
But is that really the law? I mean, has a precedence already been set, a legal precedence? Or can someone still go in and say, look, this is not in the Constitution, It is not. It was
Right.
a part of this in
Right.
Thomas Jefferson's
Right.
letter to whomever, right?
But even then, he didn't actually mean it in the way, again, that it's been
that
taken.
they took it, right?
Well, again, as I say, the separation of church and state, the idea of no, the government isn't going to sanction any religion. That is, give it official, make it the official religion of the state. Establishment, the establishment religion. Again, that's been turned on its head. And you're right. There's no law that was passed per se. Most of this has been turned over by the courts in their interpretation of the Constitution, in their interpretation of these things. So somebody interprets the Constitution to say, well, you can't have God in the classroom because of the separation clause, or you can't have a display of the Ten Commandments in the classroom because that's endorsing some form of religion. And again, it's been turned on its head. So, right, there's no law specifically saying we can't do these things. It's just court decisions interpreting the Constitution in that particular way. Which, by the way, again, I have to say, is the way that a representative republic democracy actually works. That's the way our system works. So again, the person now that's the minority person, somebody that's an atheist or maybe from a different faith tradition, say Islam or Buddhist or something like that, they might feel uncomfortable with the display of the Ten Commandments and these sort of things. So there is a certain logic to it, but whether or not
we become so much more multicultural.
Right, and I think there may be something to that, but I would suggest that what they're doing is, rather than eliminating all these things, is that there ought to be, again, another phrase that's bandied about is in the free market of ideas, there should be the opportunity to present all sides.
That's right.
But it really isn't that way. It isn't interpreted that way.
It feels almost like the pendulum has tilted the other way.
Oh, very much.
And so there are folks that that may be in opposition to the Ten Commandments, but are really allowed to express their faith in public ways.
I think again that's the nature of the sort of political arrangement that we've got, and we just have to sort of be a little bit more forthright. Maybe again a program like this. Let's talk about the value of the Ten Commandments, and maybe we can sort of change some minds and change some views on that.
So let's talk about that. Right? Let's talk about why God established 10 Commandments, right? And what was the purpose of that?
Well, if you go back to, you really have to sort of think about how the value of the Ten Commandments, thinking of three different groups. This is basically a short version of how I kind of explain all this. The first group is obviously the people to whom it was originally given. And what were the Ten Commandments supposed to do for the nation of Israel? Well, in the historical context, if you take the Bible straight up the way I do, and the historical context would be much like the movie portrayed it. The children of Israel were in bondage in Egypt, and God had come in order to deliver them from that bondage. 400 years earlier, the nation had been given a promise to their father Abraham, a promise of the land, a promise of a great blessing to come from them. We know that blessing is ultimately through Jesus Christ, but that great blessing was to come through that nation and that seed. And the point is that these people were already in a promise-given relationship. God had come to them, and He said many times, it's not because you're the greatest people. It isn't because you're the brightest people or you're the most attractive people. It's because of my great love for you, and out of His great love and grace. And also, this was a nation that had, again, just been brought out of bondage in Egypt. So the law was given to these people as a way for them to order their lives in order to enjoy this relationship that God had given to them by grace. He had given it to them according to a promise. And basically the law was, the Ten Commandments and all of the other points of the law were to say, this is how you will enjoy this relationship that I've been given to you. You will, if you live this way, and that's all the other laws, the dietary laws and the other laws that we find very strange, in addition to the Ten Commandments. This is, order your lives like this and you'll enjoy a relationship with me.